Does Brendan Shanahan still have a future with the Toronto Maple Leafs after another playoff exit? Hey everyone, welcome into Off the Post. Rob Wong joined alongside by Steve Simmons and Bruce Garrioch. And guys, it's deja vu all over again with a bit of a twist. The Maple Leafs losing in the second round of the playoffs this year, but still short of their ultimate goal. In the aftermath, everybody wondering what is the future of team president Brendan Shanahan, who is in the final year of his deal. Steve, today a lot of rumors out there about what may or may not be happening with Shanahan. What's the latest on what you're hearing?
Well, it comes to my view that Brendan Shanahan is done as president of the Toronto Maple Leafs, and that will probably be announced either on Thursday or on Friday. The New York Islanders have, as of this morning, asked for permission to speak with Shanahan for one of their positions, whether it's president or general manager, however they're hiring there. But they have asked permission and have been granted permission by the Maple Leafs to speak to Shanahan, which to me, by giving their blessing, they are basically saying so long and farewell.
I mean, it's really a nice exit plan for Shanahan if you think about it, Steve, because he was probably as you know, Steve, he was probably going to be given his walking papers anyway. This gives him a soft landing. I think if the New York Islanders are going there, they fully expect that Shanahan will take some sort of position. I was told that it's at some point or another the job of president of hockey operations was offered to Ken Holland, and Holland balked when he found out that Lou Lamoriello had a 3-year deal to be an advisor to the owner, and I also think that Ken Holland wanted to be closer to LA. So I guess, to me, that whole Islanders situation seems a little weird. You've got people saying, no, Lou isn't going to be involved. Then you've got what I was told, that Lou's got a 3-year advisory contract with the owner, which means he's not completely gone. But that being said, Steve, you know Brendan Shanahan's personal situation way better than I do. But I don't think his family ever left the New York area, right?
No, they did. They all moved to Toronto, and then his kids are now in university. One of them in Europe, and one of them at Syracuse, I believe. And so ever since the kids went off to school, I think at the beginning when Shanahan first took the job in Toronto, he was living in Toronto. Family was in New York. Kids were in private school in that area. Then when the kids got older, family kind of settled into Toronto and spent the last several years here. And I think in the last year or so, they've been going back and forth. And so, being on Long Island, which is where the Islanders are, and being in Manhattan, which is where Shanahan historically has been, are two different things. And so, yeah, it'll require some kind of a move if he chooses to take a position, assuming it's going to be offered. And work from there. And the interesting thing is that Lamoriello is one of Shanahan's career mentors. He was the general manager who drafted him. He was the general manager when Shanahan took over the Maple Leafs 11 years ago, that he went and found and hired to be his first general manager after he let Dave Nonis go. And so there's a very strong relationship, even though it didn't end well in Toronto when Shanahan chose to elevate Kyle Dubas as general manager, and that basically showed the door for Lou, or Lou chose to take the door at that point in time. So whether this is even involved in the circumstance, I think if the Islanders come to him and say, we want you to run this thing, we're going to pay you X amount of money for this many years, I think if he wants to stay in hockey and in the National Hockey League, he's going to find no better position for him under the circumstances than this one.
And I think we're kind of missing the elephant in the room here too, Rob. It's time to move on. 2 playoff wins in 10 years. How many general managers? 4 general managers? How many? 4 head coaches? Whatever it's been. It starts at the top, and you have the opportunity to move on, and clearly they are. Steve's right. He's done, and he should be done. But it's also time for fresh face. And the other thing, of course, Steve, you and I were kind of exchanging texts on this yesterday, is the anticipation is that he won't be replaced. That, that Rogers is going to start scaling back some of the money spent on the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Well, here's the thing. Right now, Rogers still is not in control of the board of directors of MLSE, and that won't happen until the deal is officially, culminated. That the stock has been transferred and the payments have been made and all the T's have been crossed and the I's have been dotted. When they meet tomorrow, there'll be 3 Rogers people on the board, 3 Bell people on the board, and the 2 independents, if you want to call them that, together are Larry Tannenbaum and Dale Lastman. So you have basically 3 against 3, which is always, sort of cancels each other. And then it comes down to Tannenbaum and Lastman, who wind up making a lot of the decisions. And it will be interesting to see what comes out of tomorrow because, as you say, I think you're going to see a new structure. And I think you're going to see the Maple Leaf general manager and probably even the head of the Raptors will be reporting to a super boss, if you want to call it that, who's in charge of all of the teams, I believe. Whether that's Keith Pelly or one of his associates, that I don't know.
Well, to Bruce's point, it really does seem like it is time for a change, not only with the front office with the Maple Leafs, but with the roster as well. And I think we're all expecting quite a bit of change on that front. Some of it just because of players on expiring deals and maybe some more to come depending on what happens here this off season. But wanted to get your guys' thoughts as well to people that cover Canadian teams and Canadian markets. And Steve, you've been a part of this for a while now, and you were there the other night when the Florida Panthers, namely Brad Marchand, Paul Maurice, and then later Matthew Tkachuk on Spin Chicklets, were talking about the pressures of playing in this city and whether that may or may not be affecting the players on the ice. What did you make of those comments this week?
If you look up nonsense in the dictionary, you might see Brad Marchand's picture beside it, or Matthew Tkachuk's with a little bit of chuckling going on. There are no players in professional sport that I've ever been around who are more pampered, more babied, and more protective than anyone who plays for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Do they get a lot of coverage? Absolutely. Do they get a lot of noise? Absolutely. But is there pressure from the outside on these guys? There's almost none. They are overpaid for the most part. They are underproductive for the most part. They have no history of postseason success. And so, where is that supposed pressure coming from? If the fact that there's 4 pages in the Sun today on the Leafs says that there's pressure on them, yeah, there's pressure on them. This team is overcovered. But boy, they don't let the guys out very often to be exposed to any of this. They're all protected. They're behind closed doors. The PR people are complete protectors in this case. And to me, playing in any Canadian market, there's a pressure because everybody loves hockey. That's the pressure. Everybody in the city wants the team to win. That's not pressure. That's privilege.
Yeah, and I kind of found it interesting. Look, they were god awful against the Panthers in Game 6. I mean, probably one of the worst. Well, it wasn't much worse than the other Game 5 or Game 7, pardon me, and it was much worse than it was in Game 5. I just I think of these Toronto Maple Leafs, players leaving the ice, and they, good on them to stay out and salute their fans, but they were booed off the ice, right? Like here in Ottawa, they lose kind of a heartbreaking series, and they're on their feet, chanting the captain's name as they leave the ice. I mean, I found that whole situation after Game 7, guys. I found it kind of odd, but I also think, Steve, you're right. Like, I'm not sure what was going on with the Panthers saying that thing about pressure. Maybe they were trying to take some heat off the Leafs, but these are this. I love when the opponents try to soften the blow for the Leafs and say, hey, they're a better team than they were last year, that's because they would love the Leafs to run back with that crew next season.
Sometimes I think sometimes like a coach like Paul Maurice, who I have all the world of time and respect for, and is a wonderful orator, and his press conferences are legendary. But when he comes out and says that 6-1 game was close, you just want to stand up in the middle of the press conference and say, "Come on, Paul, get real. We are not stupid people here." And you know what? Yeah, there's pressure on all pro athletes who sign pro contracts in whatever city they happen to play in. Wouldn't you want to play in a place where everybody talks about it, where everybody's excited by it? Shouldn't that make you better? It shouldn't make you worse. And I lived through the Edmonton Oilers dynasty, and there's no hockey city better in Canada than Edmonton. I lived through that dynasty in the 80s, and I was covering the Flames at the time. And no one's going to tell me that Wayne Gretzky and Mark Messier and Yari Curry and Glenn Anderson and Paul Coffey and Grant Fuhr and all those guys felt pressure. They felt joy. They wanted to win, and they wanted to kick everybody because they were better than everybody.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that two of those three people found success in Carolina, of all places, and Florida, which not exactly the hottest hockey market out there. So a little less coverage, as Steve said, with regards to those Panthers compared to Toronto. But lots to talk about when it comes to the Maple Leafs this offseason. As always, leave your thoughts in the comment section below for Steve Simmons and Bruce Garrioch. I'm Rob Wong. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you next time.